after 40 years. What she predicted then and how she and her friends are now. That's also worth reflecting on. Then the genie steps in again, the snake, to look at the time here, and says, okay, fine, you've got your own little principled world, that's all very well. Let's hit at the heart of the problem. Let's go to something that I know is going to make you feel queasy and uncomfortable. Dumbledore. Are you prepared to condemn Dumbledore to perpetual frustration? We know about Dumbledore. Okay, Dumbledore, we'll get there. So Dumbledore's not married. And it's not because he wants to be a priest. Okay, so now, at this stage, this does hit hard for Harry and Hermione. And they run away from the snake and they run off to Hagrid's. Okay, they go to Hagrid and say, look, this is really bad, poor Dumbledore, all the rest. And they, have a butterbeer or whatever it is with Hagrid. And then, Hagrid's there doing its thing. And then they say, look, Hagrid, about Dumbledore. He goes, look, he doesn't have a wife. Mm-hmm. It doesn't look like he's going to have one anytime soon. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's natural or unnatural? Because the church, this church that we're going to have this wedding in, doesn't allow Dumbledore to get married to a bloke. And what if they love each other? What's so wrong about that? I believe there are some posters around here with, the simultaneous with the Catholicism, good or evil. Doesn't that make Catholicism evil? That it won't recognise those kinds of marriages, even though they love each other? Hagrid thinks about that and he says, well, look, to tell you the truth, there are some blast-ended scutes I have here. And if you want to talk about natural and unnatural, well, actually I've seen homosexual behaviour with these scutes. You're aware that animals, there's a big thing here, but animals do exhibit homosexual behaviour. They had a showing at Taronga Zoo with that.
Haberdashery.
But at the same time, so you could say, well, look at these male penguins, they're doing their thing and they're raising little chicks, and so it's natural. Well, not so fast. Not so fast. And Hagrid says, well, yeah, maybe you could say that, but also I've seen other things too. Because in the animal kingdom, you see a bit of everything. You also see cannibalism. You also see infanticide. You also see the abandonment of the... So those are things that we would not want to recommend. There are things in which we are animals. We're animals. So we do the same things. But there are things in which animals do where we're also persons, in a way that the animals are not. And you say, well, what about the higher animals? Aren't they persons too? What about monkeys? What about whales? All the rest of it. Admirable qualities. We're learning more and more about them all the time. But I would not convict an orca, a killer whale, of sin. You know the one that killed the lady, the trainer, last week? Got excited and started rolling around in the water and drowned her. But you can't say, bad whale. Bad whale. You could, but I mean, I'm not going to, you can't, that's not the same thing. The whale has wonderful properties and top respect for the whales and all the rest, and I really think that's important, but I can't say that whale sinned. That's a biggie. Until I can say of an animal, not just bad dog, but you have sinned, buddy. You're going to get to doggy confession. It's not the same thing. So he jokes it over with Hermione. He goes back, poor Dumbledore, poor Hagrid, poor Dobby, the house elf. When are these guys going to get equality? Hermione's thinking now, when are these guys going to get the recognition that they need? And now Harry says again, well, I've been doing a bit more reading, not just Humanae Vitae, but I've been looking at the social teaching of the church. There's a whole raft of encyclicals, letters, starting from Rerum Novarum on the social question from the 1890s through to, the latest work of Benedict on speaking the truth in charity and the social position, equality. And I noticed that the church is always talking about the dignity of the person, even when it's not popular to do so. So if you're a half giant, and people think, oh, half giant, yeah. Well, the church says half giants are persons too. If you're a muggle, you're a person too. If you're a house elf, well, there's been problems in the past. People haven't recognised the rights of house elves as they should. They were just taking it as a accepted fact of society. But now we've realised more. And gee, you know what? It was Christians who were championing the cause of the freedom of the house elves, etc. And even you can look at the position of women themselves. You read John Paul II's letter on the dignity of women, and you go, well, this is not the patriarchal, chauvinistic, and the list goes on, that I always assumed was the case. Although I still hold with it, you might say that. So that same church, and this is the problem that Hermione has, that same church that denies Dumbledore marriage is the same church that also affirms his full dignity as a human person. So Hermione feels a bit stuck. I want Dumbledore to get married to a bloke, and yet it's not because the church is saying he's evil. The church isn't saying that. The church is saying he's a human person with all the dignity of a human person and must be accorded all the respect of a human person, insofar as he is a human person, not insofar as he has the same sex attraction. This is quibbling with words, you might say, but they're important points. And then, really, not just on the dignity of the person, but St. Mungo's Hospital. Why is it St. Mungo's Hospital? Who started up the area, the whole point of hospitals and people looking after you in hospital? Why do nurses wear that little, veil? It's the church. It was the church. What about Hogwarts itself, the whole idea of education, the university? Hey, guess what? It was the church. So although Hermione may disagree with the church on some of its stances, she can't say it's just through bloody-mindedness. There's a rationale. There is a commitment to the dignity of the person. There is a commitment to education. There is a commitment to actually living that out in practice. And if you want to look at, what is the church doing for the poor? I would say a lot. In terms of personnel, in terms of teaching. It's just a question of learning about it. Because Rita Skeeter's not going to write about that. But if you want to look into it, you can see. And we'll get back to Dean Thomas a bit later. But maybe you could say, Hermione would come back and say, but yeah, that's all very well, but it all seems to me a little bit cruel, a little bit lacking in compassion. Because you've got these principles, okay, there's a rationale. But what does that mean to me? This rationale. I love Dumbledore. I want to see Dumbledore happy. And this Vatican is like the Ministry of Magic. Half the people in there are corrupt, and they're enforcers of the Dementors. Go around, sucking joy out of people. You must not do this. You must not do that. You must not do the other. And Harry says, well, Mr. Weasley works there. Yeah, but he's an exception. He's an exception. It's the system. I don't like the system. That's what Rankle would be. Well, what do you want? What do you want as a replacement? Well, why can't we just get Dumbledore's army in there? Get rid of that Ministry of Magic, dead wood, and Dumbledore's army. There's something living, something that something we believe in. And Harry says, well, yeah, okay, but then what happens when we're in power? If our star is on the rise, won't some of the Death Eaters try and make their way in? Because they're just interested in power, and now we've got it. What happens when Neville gets really upset with Ron? How are they going to resolve their differences? We're going to have Neville's army versus Ron's army then, you're fighting it out? Every time we have a disagreement? It'll just be a split again. It's all based on personalities and subjective lines. Well, what's wrong with subjectivism? Don't we all have our own truths, says Hermione? Look at the Greeks. Look at, many of you have heard of Herodotus, I'm sure. You remember Herodotus. Herodotus, in his collection of many things which he heard and then just related, he speaks of the king of Persia, bringing in a group of Greeks and a group of Calaitians. The Greeks would burn their dead. The Calaitians would eat them out of respect. And so you have, the Greeks coming along, and the king of Persia says to them, what I have to give you? What can I pay you to make you eat your own fathers? When they say, nothing. Then he brings in the Calaitians, and he says to them in front of the Greeks, what would it take for me to make you burn your fathers? And they say, nothing. And he looks, here we have two very different points of view.